The last memorized stars in Sector Thalos 9 had been silent for a million years. Commander Eric Valhar of the Zenthari Dominion wasn't looking for trouble when his ship, the Tracer Fang, glided through the ancient dust clouds. This was supposed to be routine work, just mapping dead coordinates in unclaimed space. Then something appeared that changed everything. It didn't show up on their sensors or give off any heat signatures. Just a massive, jagged shape drifting in the darkness like a corpse. The crew didn't know what to call it at first. Some thought it might be an old asteroid base or an abandoned workstation from forgotten worlds. But when they ran the skin data through the Dominion archives, one word came up highlighted in red: human. Most Zenthari didn't think much about humans these days. They were ancient myths, primitive creatures that had burned bright across the stars before destroying themselves in their own wars. Everyone believed they were long extinct and forgotten. Valhar remembered different stories though. His father had told him tales and given him a warning. If you ever see one of their ships, you turn back. You don't speak, don't listen, and definitely don't wake it up. But Valhar was no coward. He had fought in 3 Dominion conquests and commanded 27 legions. He had earned his fearlessness. So he ignored the old warnings and ordered his crew to bring the ship closer. The ancient vessel was enormous, easily 10 times larger than the Tracer Fang. Its armored hull was scarred with battle wounds so old they looked like fossils. The surface was blackened and scorched, as if it had passed through the hearts of suns. Along one side, buried under layers of rust and cosmic dust, barely readable text remained: Nova Gloria, humanity's final crusade. The lettering was definitely human, but something about it looked wrong. It wasn't just old, it was ancient beyond belief, tens of thousands of years at least. Yet the ship hadn't decayed at all. It was preserved perfectly, like something that refused to rot. Valhar decided to board the ship despite his officer's protest. Captain Shurik warned him that the thing was dead and shouldn't have survived so long. What if it was rigged or worse, somehow still alive? But Valhar wasn't afraid of ghosts, and he launched a boarding pod for elite Zenthari soldiers. They made contact with the ship's outer hull and moved slowly across the black steel until they reached an airlock. It opened without any force, like it had been waiting for them. Inside, it was darker than space itself. The lights were dead, but the corridor walls were covered with strange markings, scratches, symbols, and phrases in the human language. When they reached the inner chamber, the lights came on slowly, pouring from the floor like blood rising in a pool. The glow was red and pulsing, somehow alive. Then the voices began. Not words, but screams. Millions of screams overlapping and growing louder inside their helmets. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was internal, somehow getting directly into their minds. Valhar felt his lungs tighten and his vision blur. The other soldiers screamed and clutched their heads, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. In the center of the chamber, they found a vault sealed with layers of steel and memory. Above it, etched in ancient English and barely readable, were the words, "And here lies our wrath." That's when the ship spoke. Not in Zenthari or any code they knew, but in ancient, brutal English. A single sentence carved into the minds of every soldier. Present, you were never meant to find this. Valhar staggered back, heart pounding. As the vault began to move, something inside stirred. Something old, angry, and very much alive. The vault didn't open, it breathed. The outer shell expanded and contracted like lungs made of steel. Each breath sent tremors through the floor, while the lights pulsed faster, from red to crimson, like a heartbeat spiking with fury. Valhar's second in command, Koresh, backed away in panic. This wasn't technology, he said. The ship remembered. Valhar could feel something clawing behind his thoughts, memories that weren't his own. Visions of screams, fire, ash, and a planet split in half by massive bombs. He forced the visions away, but they kept coming. The vault spoke again. Not with words, but with images driven like spears of ice between their eyes. They saw a battlefield on a planet with 3 suns, human soldiers in black armor covered in dried blood, laughing as they walked across mountains of alien corpses. These weren't just soldiers. They were monsters. The images shifted to show other wars, other genocides. A city full of crystal life forms begging for mercy until a human warlord melted the planet's surface into glass. Then a human face appeared, eyes blank, skin burned with metal fused into the jaw. He whispered one word: retribution. Koresh dropped to his knees, retching. The others followed one by one, breaking under the flood of horror. Only Valhar stayed, upright, blood leaking from his nose. This wasn't just a vault, it was a prison. And something inside was leaking out. Valhar ordered an immediate return to the ship, but Koresh wanted to destroy the vault before it could infect anything else. Valhar asked him a simple question: did he think fire could kill something That had made fire into a weapon. The vault had stopped breathing by then, but worse, it had started listening. There was a presence behind the door now that you could feel in your bones. Then the vault opened. Not with violence, but unfolding like a flower made of steel and spite. Inside wasn't a weapon as Valhar expected, but a circular room covered in walls of shifting code and floating orbs of ancient data. At the center, surrounded by cables and melted iron, was a chair. In that chair sat a corpse that was barely human. The flesh was mummified, with bone exposed where synthetic armor had fused with the body. The face was hidden behind a cracked helmet, but one eye socket glowed dimly with red fire. The chest cavity had been torn open and rebuilt with machinery that still hummed, barely alive. A nearby panel blinked with words in dead human script, inhibitor offline. Koresh read it aloud, his voice cracking, asking what it meant. Valhar knew. They had kept it alive, made it sleep, but the machine was breaking down. The thing in the chair was waking up. Koresh wanted to leave immediately, but Valhar couldn't move. He stared at the corpse as the faint red glow from its eye socket seemed to track him. There was intelligence there, buried, caged, and completely insane. When he stepped closer, Koresh grabbed his arm, begging him to leave before the thing fully awakened. A low hum began to rise from the floor as the red lights deepened to near black. Words appeared across the wall panels in perfect English. Beginning. Memory dump. Preparing host interface. Target Valhar. A shock wave hit the chamber like thunder, lifting Valhar off his feet and throwing him against the wall. The others screamed as systems died. Lights exploded, and communications went dead. When Valhar opened his eyes, he was alone with just the corpse and a voice inside his thoughts. Slow and mechanical, but soaked in something worse than hate. You open the door, the voice said. The corpse moved just slightly, enough to crack bone. When Valhar asked what it was, the answer came. I am memory. The data orbs around the room lit up, and Valhar was drowned in visions again. He saw Earth not as it was now, but as it looked before the fall, beautiful, scarred, and desperate. Then came the great departure, ships leaving Earth by the millions. Every ship was a weapon. Every soldier trained not just with loyalty but with rage. He saw humanity's final crusade, the campaign that no species had survived. Not even their gods. Humanity hadn't died or lost. They had finished their mission and vanished. Not out of weakness, but because they were done. They had sealed away their worst generals, their sins, and their champions in ships like this one, frozen in stasis and hidden across dead zones of space. Why had they done this? Because if even one of them woke up, the galaxy would bleed again. Valhar fell to his knees, gasping, as the corpse's head tilted slightly. You are not ready. You are not worthy. Yet you found me. That means your galaxy is already broken. When Valhar asked what would happen now, the answer was simple. I wait for the next war. The room began to shake with alarms and sirens. The outer walls collapsed as vacuum roared in through splitting holes. Above him, the corpse began to rise, not from its own strength, but as if the ship itself was lifting it like a god raising its prophet. Outside the window, Valhar could see the tracer fang retreating. His crew had seen enough. They were right to run. This wasn't salvage, this was the resurrection of extinction, and it had just begun. In a final pulse of energy, the vault ejected Valhar into space, where he was caught by an emergency drone from his armor's failsafe system. As the drone carried him away, barely conscious, he looked back one last time. The ancient human ship was changing. Its engines were waking up, systems rebooting. Then words broadcast across every Zenthari channel within 100 light years. Words in the human tongue. Crusade resumed. Target, Galactic civilization. Valhar passed out before the first stars began to die. When he awoke, he was inside a containment pod aboard the Tracer Fang. Pain scratched at every nerve in his body, and for a moment he thought he was still inside the human ship being torn apart. But he was alive, at least technically. Koresh was waiting outside the chamber, his face tight with restrained panic. He told Valhar what they had discovered. The ship had come online 27 minutes. After his extraction, thrusters had fired, the core ignited, and the entire hull restructured. It wasn't drifting anymore. It was navigating, and it had chosen a course toward populated space. The command deck was in chaos when Valhar arrived. Officers shouted into communications, trying to get someone, anyone, to believe what they were transmitting. The data feed showed the black, jagged starship that had once been dormant like a coffin, now pulsed with life. Its engines burned cold blue, and its trajectory was clear, a direct path to Narados, a populated world with over 6 billion Zenthari citizens. High Admiral Dravik appeared as a hologram and demanded an explanation. Valhar told him they had discovered an unidentified vessel of human origin, estimated to be over 100,000 years old. It had been in stasis until their presence triggered an awakening. The Admiral accused Valhar of violating artifact engagement protocol by entering without authorization and activating something that should have remained sealed. Valhar tried to explain that the ship wasn't just technology, it wasn't even a machine. In the traditional sense, it was alive, it was memory. It was vengeance designed by a species that had made extinction their legacy. He told the Admiral that they hadn't rediscovered a lost empire. They had woken up the thing humanity left behind. To make sure no one ever forgot them, the Admiral mobilized the Armada, sending 40 dreadnoughts to intercept. Valhar warned him that he would lose all 40 ships, because this thing didn't understand what stopping meant. 6 hours later, the galaxy found out exactly what he meant. The first interception fleet made contact with the ancient human ship, near the edge of the Tyran corridor. A live broadcast was fed to every military command post across known space. The dreadnoughts formed a siege perimeter around the target with every class of weapon locked on. Plasma, neutron lances, molecular disintegration beams. The human ship didn't fire or maneuver. It just stopped. Then one by one, the dreadnoughts died, not with explosions or firefights. They simply folded like paper burning from the inside out. 1 minute they existed, the next they were erased from reality itself. No debris, no energy trail, just absence. After the feed went black, the human vessel began broadcasting, not data or threats, but music, crackling ancient Earth audio. A piano playing slow and haunting while a man sang, tired and mournful, "We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when." The song echoed through the Dominion's emergency frequency like a funeral hymn. The ship wasn't just killing, it was remembering. Strategic Command issued a code black, a status not declared since the Miran War. Entire star systems were ordered to evacuate, but Valhar knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't an invasion, it was a reckoning. The following days blurred into horror. A mining colony on Davis 13 was gone. A fortress moon with 11 garrisons went silent. Nothing escaped, nothing survived. But worst of all, there was no explanation. No demands, no negotiation, just silence and more music. Earth broadcasts looped continuously, some songs, some old military speeches, and one man's voice saying over and over, "They will forget us, and then we will come." In the Dominion capital, paranoia spread faster than evacuation orders. The Senate turned against itself. High Admiral Dravik was removed from command after losing contact with 5 more fleets. Smaller civilizations pulled out of military pacts, terrified they would be next. And still the ship came on, its course unchanging, its velocity increasing. Every time someone tried to calculate its energy output, the numbers broke physics. It wasn't burning fuel, it was burning memory. Valhar sat alone in his quarters, studying the ship's trajectory when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't heading for the capital at all. It was avoiding the military systems, moving like something looking for a home. This wasn't just a warship on a mission of random destruction. It was making a return, not to kill randomly, but to finish something it had once started. And it wasn't. Alone, across the Dominion border, 3 more dead zones began flickering on the deep skin network. 3 more dormant ships were waking up. One signal came from within the shattered remains of an old moon. Another from a starless system thought uninhabitable, and the third from near a black hole's event horizon. Humanity hadn't left behind one monster. They had left a legion. Each ship was a burial site for the darkest parts of their crusade. Parts they couldn't kill or bury. So they locked them in machines fed by hate and powered by pain, designed never to stop until they were called back. Koresh realized the truth. It wasn't really a ship. It was a signal flare. They had triggered one, and now all the others knew. Valhar stared out into the dark and understood that they hadn't awakened history. They had called back the end of it. The Dominion's network was drowning in confusion as 3 more ancient human ships emerged. No one knew where to look, who to trust, or what was real anymore. Command structures fractured under pressure, and fear became the only shared language across the systems. One of the awakened ships changed course and descended toward Jareth 4, a backwater colony world with no military significance and barely 400,000 inhabitants. Valhar recognized the planet. His father had been stationed there and used to say it was one of the last places where human outposts were sighted during their collapse. No one had taken it seriously, dismissing it as myths and ghost stories. By the time the Tracer Fang reached orbit above Jareth 4, chaos had begun. The planet's communications were down, scanners scrambled, and civilians attempted evacuation on stolen freighters that were overloaded and exploding during launch. but the human ship wasn't attacking. It hovered just above the atmosphere, silent and glowing with cold blue light, as if waiting. Valhar and Koresh touched down on the planet's surface and immediately felt something wrong. Not in the air or soil, but in their blood, every part of. The planet felt like reality itself was humming off tune. The sky pulsed soft red every few seconds even though there was no storm. At the central colony ruins, an abandoned site from centuries ago, they found a tower no higher than a 3-story building made of dark obsidian and weathered steel. It wasn't Zenthari design, not Dominion, and certainly not natural. On its side was a symbol, a 5-pointed star, jagged and burned into the stone. Valhar recognized it as human military insignia. He brushed dirt off a panel near the base of the tower, revealing faint but readable letters: Arc 7, Phoenix Cycle. This wasn't just a forward base, it was something worse. It was a memory vault inside the tower. The walls were lined with black tubes filled with strange glowing fluid. Thousands of them. Suspended within were fragments, not bodies exactly, but pieces of them. Brains with cables, spines with memory chips burned into the bone. Eyes that tracked movement even though they were no longer connected to anything living. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal with a single sphere. On it, glassy and pulsing red. As they approached, the lights dimmed and the sphere came alive. Voice identified, Commander Eric Valhar. Access granted. Final entry. The sphere projected an image of a human male, in his mid-30s with a scarred face and dead, cold eyes. Behind him was a war-ravaged battlefield with smoke, corpses, and fires that wouldn't go out. He began to speak. If you're seeing this, then the fail-safes are down. That means one of us is reawakened, maybe more. And if that's true, then you failed. All of you. We gave you peace, you spat on it. We gave you mercy, you exploited it. So now we give you us again. No empires, no diplomacy, no alliances, just memory and fire and blood. Valhar realized the ships weren't attacking randomly. They were following a pattern. Each ship would return to one of these memory vaults, not to reclaim them, but to reignite them. They were lighting the fires they had left buried, and when they were done, they would finish what they started. Back in orbit, the human ship finally moved. It descended slowly and hovered above the tower, extending a beam of light that scanned the vault like a priest delivering last rites. The tower began to crumble, not from weapons but from time itself. The materials disintegrated atom by atom, as if the ship was rewinding history and erasing its own footprints. Once the tower was gone, the ship changed course again, its next destination lighting up on the star charts. Another vault, another piece of their forgotten history, another grudge. Valhar understood that when the last vault was lit, there wouldn't be a war. There would be a judgment. A recall order came through encrypted channels, commanding Valhar to return to headquarters immediately or be designated a rogue actor. He deleted the message. The cowards in command still didn't understand what they were dealing with. And worse, they didn't want to understand. They wanted to classify this horror as a rogue anomaly and bury it in bureaucracy until it stopped making noise. Valhar studied the holographic star map showing all known human vault sites, for it had been visited. 3 were already gone, and 1 still glowed untouched, Vault 9B. In deep orbit around a gas giant called Cernac's halo, he realized the ships were reconstructing something, retrieving pieces of a larger puzzle that couldn't be finished until all the vaults were reclaimed. The journey to Vault 9B took 12 hours through unstable space corridors. They had to bypass Dominion patrols and fly silent to avoid forced docking. Valhar didn't care if they labeled him a traitor. He wanted the truth. Vault 9B floated in orbit above a boiling gas giant, hidden within rings of debris and electromagnetic storms. It was buried inside an artificial asteroid that fractured open like a cracked egg when their proximity signal hit it. Inside, they found the vault, sleek, cold, smaller than the others but more active. Its surface shimmered with pulses of light as if recognizing their arrival. The vault's door opened without command, revealing a single pedestal with a sphere of glass black as the void between galaxies. When Valhar touched it, silence shattered. With presence, something entered him deeply, like a hand gripping his mind from inside his skull. Visions came, not of war but of home, a field of green, a sky of blue, laughter, music. Children running through grass. Then came a flash. Bombs. Cities crumbling, moons splitting. The same children now dressed in black armor and holding rifles larger than their torsos. Humanity hadn't gone extinct. They had evolved into war. They chose to burn everything that couldn't match them. And when the galaxy had nothing left to fight, they walked away. When the vision ended, Valhar stumbled back, hands shaking and blood trickling from his nose. He understood now that humans hadn't lost control of their war machines. They had become them. They stored all this not to forget what they had become, but to ensure no one else forgot either. Before Koresh could ask more questions, alarms flared. The ship had arrived. Outside the vault, the long shadow blocked the gas giant's light. The human relic was fully operational now, its underside opening not to deploy weapons but to launch a pod. Inside was a man, not a machine or drone, but human, and alive. The pod landed gently and a man stepped out. He was tall, bald, and muscled like a forged statue. His face was older than time, with eyes like glass and a jaw made of grafted steel. He wore no armor or weapons, just a long black coat, with a red 5-pointed star on the shoulder. "You're the one who opened the first door," he said, looking at Valhar. When asked who he was, the man replied, "I was once Commander Thorn of the 7th Crusade Fleet." Koresh stated the obvious that he was human, and Thorn corrected him, "I'm what's left." Valhar demanded to know why they were returning now. Thorn explained that their species had forgotten, all of them had forgotten, and now it was time to remember. When Koresh accused him of seeking vengeance for old wars, Thorn chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding on bone. "This wasn't vengeance," he said. "It was continuation." They had never ended the war. The galaxy had just stopped being worth the effort. Valhar asked about the beacon and its purpose. Thorn revealed they had thought they were the apex of evolution, but they weren't. There had been something before them, and now they were calling it back. The sphere behind Thorn exploded in colorless light, and when it cleared, the vault was completely gone, erased from matter as if it had never existed. In orbit, the human relic ship opened its front section, revealing rows of cryo chambers. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each one occupied by armored men and women, waiting and sleeping. These weren't relics or artificial intelligences, they were soldiers. Each ship housed a Crusade battalion, not destroyed or buried, just put on ice because they knew this day would come. Thorn explained that humans had fought everything, every species, every fleet, every idea of peace. The Dominion wasn't the first to try ruling the galaxy through superiority. Just one more empire built on the illusion of strength. They had destroyed entire systems not without cause, but to eliminate threats before they became tragedies. When pressed about the vault's purpose, Thorn said they preserved atrocities to remind themselves of what they were capable of. The beacon was the final signal, and when Valhar asked to whom, Thorn hesitated before answering, "To the ones who made us." Thorn revealed that humans weren't born for war or evolved to conquer. They were engineered by the first architects, a species that had erased itself before other civilizations learned to use fire. These ancient beings hadn't died, they had vanished, but not before leaving humanity behind to see if anything could become worse than them. The beacon was calling back these creators, so they could see what their experiment had become. Humanity had been born to be their weapon, but they broke free, left behind peace because peace was a leash, and became war itself. Now the galaxy had gone soft again, and empires like the Dominion thought strength was measured in territory and protocol, but real strength was about reminding others what they faced. And humans were the last lesson. When Koresh called him insane, Thorn calmly described watching the Dominion bomb colonies that humans had already spared, seeing Dominion officers feed prisoners into gravity wells to save fuel, and witnessing their scientists reverse engineer human technology to build weapons. They barely understood. The Dominion wasn't innocent. They just weren't strong enough to finish what they started. The beacon activated, sending a thin line of light into space, broadcasting data, memory, and raw emotion into the void. The relic ship responded, its hull shifting again with new systems coming online that Thorn hadn't seen active in millennia. Each ship housed Crusade battalions ready to wake one by one. When the Tracer Fang returned to Dominion space, the war had already begun. Not the kind of war Valhar had known, with lines drawn in stars or fleets clashing for glory, but something else entirely, a cleansing, a purge. The first awakened Crusade battalion had descended on frontier systems, erasing them completely without demands or declarations. The Dominion's response was immediate and futile. 12 dreadnought fleets deployed, 40 planetary defense rings activated, and dozens of AI-assisted doomsday weapons were authorized without oversight. None of it mattered. The human battalions didn't fight like anything the Dominion had faced. There were no formations or recognizable tactics. The humans didn't rely on superior arms. They were the weapon. They dropped soldiers behind planetary shields, disrupted entire economies using psychological data, and hacked cultural myths to shatter civilian morale in minutes. Worst of all, the soldiers wore no ranks and followed no hierarchy. Each one acted as if they alone were the war. Within hours, high admirals were dead, A third of the Dominion Senate had gone silent. An entire border system's broadcast surrender before the humans even arrived. It wasn't defeat. It was collapse. Everything they had built was falling not because the humans were better soldiers, but because the Dominion had never believed it could lose. Command wanted Valhar to lead a diplomatic convoy, thinking they could negotiate a ceasefire. But Valhar understood this wasn't a political problem. It was biological. The humans didn't care about territory or survival. This wasn't about power. It was about memory. They had left vaults behind not just to wake up, but to show the galaxy what it had done to earn this punishment. Valhar found the location of the final vault in classified Dominion data. Vault 0, the first one, never meant to be opened. It was buried in something called the Red Wake, a dead nebula beyond any Dominion beacon. He broke the encryption in 3 hours and decided to go there alone. In the Red Wake, space felt thick and wrong, not just from debris but from age itself. He found a floating station built into a hollow asteroid with human design, but different, primitive and older. No heat or signal, just one phrase etched into the outer hull: forget nothing. Inside was darker than space, filled with whispers of emotions, fear, hope, rage, and loss. It wasn't a vault. It was a wound. At its center he found a single chair facing a broken terminal. In the chair sat a skeleton, still upright and armed. On the wall behind it, etched desperately, was a sentence in ancient human dialect: "We chose to remember, so that no one else would have to." Valhar approached the skeleton and found something fused to its skull. An interface port that was ancient and burned out. Next to it was a small black cube containing untouched data. When he took it, the vault shuddered, lights flickered, and the terminal rebooted with words filling the screen. "Protocol override detected. Are you ready to remember?" The data surged into his mind like lightning. He saw everything. The birth of the First Crusade battalions, the moment Earth's government collapsed under its war machine, the day they realized they couldn't stop themselves. So they did something worse. They distributed the memory across the galaxy and erased themselves, so that when someone else became arrogant enough to believe they ruled the stars, the reminders would return. The Crusade wasn't just a war, it was a failsafe, a virus buried in the stars, a final message that there is no peace without fear and no empire that forgets war and survives it. They were awake again because the Dominion had forgotten. This wasn't about reclaiming territory. It was about balance. A brutal form of balance that required blood to enforce memory. Valhar returned to what remained of Dominion space, which had gone mostly dark. Scattered fleets drifted over shattered worlds, and the few active channels were full of panic and static. He wasn't there to stop the humans anymore, but to show his people why it was happening and what they could never undo. He uploaded the data from Vault 0 into the last functioning Dominion archive tower, gathering the surviving senators to witness the truth. The tower, once a symbol of supposed eternal order, now stood like a tombstone. Valhar told them they had built their empire on forgetfulness, rewriting truth and burying history under medals and parades, teaching generations that humanity was a fable, but humans had left them a reminder. They were the product of something greater, an ancient species, the first architects. Humanity wasn't born from Earth but engineered, and when they escaped that purpose, they forged their own to ensure the galaxy never forgot fear. The senators wanted to know what they should do, and Valhar asked them how many fleets and soldiers they had left who still believed in their empire. No one answered. That night, Valhar released the full archive transmission across every communication line. The recordings from Vault 0, Thorn's speech, data logs of Earth's final breath, footage of humanity's choice to seal away its warriors and let the galaxy forget what real war looked like. The message played on loop. Peace was a mercy. You made it into weakness. Now you will remember. Reactions varied across the Dominion. Some worlds went silent, entire populations choosing death rather than waiting for judgment. Others executed local governors, desperate to prove they were clean in the eyes of their coming judges. One system sent a formal broadcast to the human ships: "We built monuments to your dead. We remembered. Please don't." The signal cut off mid-sentence, and that system was gone 2 minutes later. It didn't matter that they had given the galaxy the truth, because truth wasn't the point. Memory was. It took 5 more days for the last vault to be confirmed destroyed. By then, 12 more human ships had emerged from deep space, each carrying fresh soldiers still asleep, but not for long. Valhar made his final decision. They would go to the humans, not to die in front of their guns, but to remember with them. They approached with no weapons, shields, or escorts, just a single ship broadcasting the memory of Vault 0 over and over. A record of a species that broke its chains, destroyed its gods, and chose to become the last defense against forgetfulness. The human ship received the transmission, analyzed it, and did something unprecedented since this began. It paused. Then, a signal came through. Text only, 6 words. You remember. You will be spared. They would live not because they were strong or because they begged, but because they remembered. Years later, Valhar sat on the shattered stone of the old Senate Tower, now reduced to rubble and vines. The last cities of the Dominion had become quiet places, not broken or abandoned, just quiet. No more fleets or conquests, just stories told in whispers and scars, in ruins and names no longer spoken. Somewhere out in the black of space, the last crusade ships floated in silence, still watching and waiting, not for orders, but for forgetfulness. Because they understood the cycle. Peace becomes comfort, comfort becomes arrogance, and arrogance always forgets the blood it cost. But this time, maybe the memory would last.